Hello everybody, it's Christina Marie Weber and I run a company called Christian Biz Owners on Fire, and we help faith-based and spiritual business owners who want a more fulfilling and prosperous business or ministry while putting God, their purpose, and their relationships first on a daily basis. So basically those of you who've been following me know about our process, and that is each month I come up with a question that either someone directly asked me, something that came up with some of the people I work with, someone that's a prospect, just people in the business community that I thought is something that other business owners might benefit from learning more about. And I create an educational video on that. So if you have a question for me, feel free to direct message me on LinkedIn at Christina M. Weber, MarieWeber.com, or Christina Marie Weber, or Christian Biz Owners on Fire, or you can send me a message on my contact page at my website, ChristianBizOwnersOnFire.com. So the question this month refers to a retirement, like what is retiring from a Christian perspective and as a business owner. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So this has been actually something that's been on my mind. I work with a variety of different clients. Actually, it's the same client, but they're at various stages of their business development. So the key thing, the similarities are they're high integrity, they want to enjoy the journey as they're doing it, and they want excellence in a profitable business, but they're not willing to sacrifice making compromises that are against their moral code. So those are the clients I work with. So some of them are looking at exiting their business, and so this comes up and it's very relevant. So it's been on my mind. I'm in the age group where some people are starting to exit the workforce, and so I think it's really important to think about this. And one of the things why it's important, especially as a business owner, but as a person as well, just that doesn't own a business, we always want to begin with the end in mind. So if you have a certain plan for your business, a plan for what you're going to do regarding your business as you get older, it's really important because it affects the decisions you make today. So, and what really prompted me to do the video now, I saw a press conference, and this was RFK Jr., the Health and Human Services cabinet member, and Dr. Oz, who's another member of his team. And they were talking about, they were studying an app using, it was about data. They were going to create there was an executive order where they're going to create it so that medical data can be shared more easily. And the benefits of that were what they found in some other countries that have very good health outcomes, like Indonesia was an example. And what they found is when the government was able to use data to help people make good decisions, personal decisions about their health, it actually increased their lifespan. And the way it worked in Indonesia is they have like an app, and if you want to, you don't have to do it, but you can opt in and it will tell you based on your habits or your age, your health profile, if you would make this little habit change or this little habit change, this actually could help you prevent getting cancer, or it could help you add years to your life. And it's actually been very effective. It's helped people not only live longer, but have a better health and more energy and quality of life. Really cool concept. So that's going to be rolling out here in the years to come. But one of the kind of incidental comments that came up as a result of this press conference, Dr. Oz said, and why it's kind of a public policy emphasis, he said, for every year that we can delay someone exiting the workforce in the form of retirement and staying a year longer, it saves the government. I couldn't figure out the number he said, but there's a dollar amount per person that does that. And I had never heard that as a global society, it actually costs us money when someone retires versus, they saved up and it's not a big deal, but as a society, it does cost us money. So there are advantages, and that's just economic. There are other factors that I'm going to talk about in this video, but to our country when people retire, the younger they retire. So that's what we're going to talk about. So there's a couple of points that I want to really have you think about from the perspective as a Christian and a perspective as a business owner. So the first one is, what does Scripture or maybe some Christian thought leaders say about retirement? So I did a little bit of a search, and if you want to know the exact Bible verses, I'm happy to share them with you if you want to send me a message. But basically, the summary of the Scripture on retirement, the idea of retirement as we're thinking about it now, is it really doesn't present retirement as stopping all work, but it does acknowledge that shifting roles with age, ongoing fruitfulness, and God's provision across the whole span of life. So Christians often interpret retirement as an invitation to redirect energy from earning a living to mentoring, serving, and worshiping more fully. So, and I've always felt this logically didn't make sense, that we're just created at some chronological age to go from in the workforce producing things, or maybe you're supporting your family unit by taking care of the household, and that's your unit's doing that. You're still producing and investing time and energy and work, to all of a sudden at some chronological age you shouldn't have to do that anymore. That didn't make sense to me. But there's some things about it we want to think about as Christians, and I think one of the first things, the other aspect of this, years ago I took a Bible study on Crown Ministries, and basically one of the lessons they taught is to manage your money well so that you can stop working for paid employment, and then you would have time to do service. So again, that was their particular philosophy, is it was exit the workforce, but then use that time to do service. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think there are other alternatives as well, as far as how we can be fruitful in our elder years, and the concept of work and giving back and service. So my take is, I think the way our culture views retirement is not particularly healthy, and I don't think it really lines up well with the Christian idea of retirement, and I'll talk about a couple of reasons why. So here are my personal observations about retirement. So I just gave you the Christian thought leader, kind of a synopsis of what the Scripture is kind of saying, and this is just my observation as an observer of people. So a couple things you have to think about here is your view of salvation or how things work in that really do affect the way you're going to view retirement, even within the Christian community. So, there's some in the Christian community that go with the once saved, always saved idea of salvation. That is one way of looking at it. That is going to have very different implications than, say, the framework that I use, which is a Catholic framework, which we don't believe it's once saved, always saved. We say that life is about growing in virtue and dying in the state of grace. So in the Catholic theology of salvation, you're not in once you make a decision. It's a constant ongoing. What really matters is where you are when you die, and there's a whole information about that, about being in the state of grace, being not in the state of grace, what that means. But basically, it's not that you earn your salvation, is that you need to be continually striving to grow in virtue, and it never stops until you die. And we want to stay on the right trajectory. It is something you can lose in Catholic theology. Now that's going to have some different implications depending on how you think about that. So I'm going with more of the Catholic thought process on that. So if you're thinking of life as a Christian, workplace or out of workplace is about virtue development, what happens when somebody stops regular work? It can either help or it can hinder their virtue development. So some people do fantastic things in their traditional retirement years, or when they maybe are just at a certain age, or when they leave the workforce. I'm thinking of a couple in our church. I can't remember, it was like a workshop I did, and it had you think about what was one thing that somebody did that made a huge difference in your life. And one of the things that came up was something this couple did. In their retirement years, they had gone to different conferences, like Catholic conferences across the country, and they said, you know what, this would be amazing in where I live, in Wichita, Kansas. So they actually started a Catholic annual family conference that I've attended, with the exception of 1 or 2 years, for 24 years straight. It has had a huge impact on me as far as bringing in resources. It's an annual kind of inspiration for me. So because of what they did in their retirement, it wasn't easy. There were many years that conference wasn't making money, was very stressful, this kind of thing. That's an example of what someone can do in retirement that's really good. I think of him, whatever you think of him, is kind of to you, but if you look at like Rush Limbaugh, who passed away 2021, 2022. So in his retirement time, I mean, he was 70 when he passed. Well, he was dealing with cancer. He worked up until the very end. So again, and it was quite inspirational to those that liked him and appreciated what he did. And again, that's an example. I mean, he was completely justified in pulling out of the workforce and doing whatever, but he felt a need to continue doing his work even into the elderly years, or typical retirement years. So those are a couple of examples of people that have done, extraordinary things in the years where typically our culture says time to, go on and you go to cruises and do whatever, just relax. But I think there are other examples of people who use the freedom of retirement, do not use the freedom of retirement in prudent ways and beneficial to their own souls. I know of a person who retired at 45 and then pretty much sat in front of a TV the next, 40 years of his life. And that's not, I've shared that with other people. They said, oh yeah, I know someone else who did that. And it just didn't really contribute, and really their personality fairly consistently deteriorated, and their virtue development with that kind of a routine. When you lose structure in your life, which a lot of times people in retirement, when they actually leave the workforce completely, a lot of times it gets hard just doing simple things. When you don't have to get up at a certain time, you don't have outside commitments, you don't have people you have to, get along with, or situations you have to navigate. And what can happen is you can start to get so out of touch with people that are in the workforce that have busy lives that you can be a bit insensitive. I've heard other people talk about this, where sometimes you can get fairly selfish in your retirement years. You get used to doing this activity at this time, you're used to being able to schedule whatever you feel like. And if someone asks you to do something within a scheduled thing you already planned that's more of a recreational or pleasure thing, you can get kind of put out. And if you've ever been around people like that, it's pretty unattractive. I remember your whole framework of things, your value system, everything kind of starts to gradually change. And I don't think people really factor this in when they're thinking about, what am I going to do? When am I going to retire? What does that look like? What does it look like in the typical retirement years for me? I remember going on a cruise, and in a cruise, you're constantly eating. I mean, they have mealtime, and then, of course, they have a big crescendo on the Thursday night of the cruise where it's a midnight buffet, and it's, very luxurious thing. I remember, so we stayed up, went to that, and just to say we had gone, and I remember standing in line, and there was an individual. It was very crowded, and so I kind of moved to the left of the individual in front of me. I wasn't in front of her, but just to kind of make more room for people. And this was a person of retirement age. A lot of people I have heard of, they may go on 4 cruises a year in their retirement, or travel, like that's a part of their retirement. And she said, I'm in line here. Like there wasn't going to be enough food for all of us, and like I was cutting into line. There's just a framework about that just you can get into when you your life is oriented around the next meal, the next social event, the next entertainment thing, the next TV show, that I contend can be very damaging to your soul and your development of virtue. I was in Las Vegas one time and I'm in a cab, and just to discover this cab driver actually had been an executive in like a Fortune 500 company. He had retired, and he intentionally drove a cab in Las Vegas. That was a choice he did, and it was based on he had done research that like really high powered executives who make a ton of decisions all the time, when they go from that to retirement, where maybe you have 5 decisions you have to make that whole day, within 2 years, many of them were dead. That was why he actually chose to drive a cab. I mean, he didn't do it full time, but it was to give him some stimulation to counteract that. So there can be health issues of going from Mach 10 to you're not making any decisions other than what am I going to eat next, this kind of thing. I've seen people with the free time of retirement, and when they're not using it well, over functioning in their different roles in their family, kind of busybodies. They've got so much time on their hand. They're analyzing everybody else and what choices they're making and how are their kids parenting and just on and on. And when you're more busy, you just don't have that kind of time to do that, and it's pretty undermining the next generation when they're learning things too. I mean, you have a lot of wisdom being older that they're gaining, and to have that constant monitoring of how they're doing and this kind of thing, in some ways I don't think is very helpful at all. I think a lot of people find it's fun at first, but then the boredom sets in, the lack of meaning. There's a higher percentage of depression in these age groups. And sometimes people retire because they just didn't like their jobs. I mean, it was so miserable. And so then they kind of live a life of counting down from when they can retire. I remember my friend of mine's secretary, all she could do was how many days until she retired. And it just every day was one day less that I'm having to work, and it just, so they're not really taking, even when they still are working, everything's geared towards when they're not working. And sometimes with this mindset, they're so anticipating when they don't have to work, they don't think about developing new skills, maybe what they would do with the time they have it. It's just walking away from hell rather than walking towards heaven. So there's also an opportunity cost I've observed in the workforce of leaving, of these people leaving, not these in particular, but people with experience, life experience, work experience, spiritual growth. When those people leave the workforce, it's quite a void. You've got younger workers, yeah, they may have more tech skills and this and that, but they don't have some of the wisdom and the balance that people that have just been around longer have, and you're removing that from the workforce. Not only that, but you're also many times removing skills, important skills, experience that just take time to develop. That's gone. In fact, Elon Musk, I'm going to put this in the notes here. He did a really good video. It's called Why 60 is the Perfect Age to Start Over. I'm going to put that in there. He had a lot of different points that I thought were great about really the value you have as someone in your 50s, 60s, 70s, really to offer, that our culture says, go ahead and step back and thank you for your service, this kind of thing. The other thing that is unique, for many people, they may for the first time, I'm not saying you have to be in a paid work environment, but these people have, in many cases, resources and time and energy if they're focused. That's one thing Elon points out. People say they don't have energy. A lot of times energy is related to having goals and things you're excited about doing. So if you use it right in your quote-unquote retirement when you're not working in the paid workforce, I think it's still very aligned with Christian values to use that time, use that energy to do different projects or things. I interviewed a guest on my radio show, Joseph, I don't remember his last name. He used his retirement time to invest in writing, doing family genealogy. Joseph Fulton, great benefit. And a lot of times these aren't things that are super profitable, but they really could offer long-term value to many generations. And that's a luxury of being in retirement. If you've planned well for it, you have the funds, and if you've managed your health, and you can do those kind of things that aren't things that really could make a living, but they could be phenomenally valuable. And the other thing I've observed is sometimes with our current view on retirement, there can be a pressure to retire. And yeah, the reality is it makes perfect sense when we were doing physical labor that at some point you do have less ability to do that. Totally makes sense to leave those kind of jobs. But many of our jobs now, our careers, are related to things you could do as a paraplegic. It just involves your thought process. And with technology, you could do a lot of other, make a lot of things work, even if the body isn't totally doing what you need it to do. So I've noticed this pressure. Like, I remember a friend of mine who really great in her work. She's a teacher. She's just excellent what she does. And she has a schedule. It's a part-time schedule, works great for her other life. And was actually apologizing to a group of us. Oh, well, she's going to continue working another year, not thinking of retirement yet, because she just likes being with kids. It's almost like she'd apologized for that. And I actually said to her, I said, you're an amazing resource in that school to those younger teachers, to the students that get a seasoned teacher in their key learning parts of their life. So these are the things I've observed around the whole idea of retirement. So lastly, the last point I wanted to make is why and how coming up with a personal philosophy as a business owner and a Christian on retirement, even if it differs from the culture or your emotional or your relationship circle, is important. Okay? So there's a couple of things. As a business owner, we get to create the work environment and our position, unlike those that work for others. So if you're comparing someone that worked for a business or company that didn't like, it was okay, wasn't that great, compared to you, I mean, the people I work with, we're trying to create a business they really enjoy. They're using their genius. Those are apples and oranges. Why would you want to leave something if you've done it that way, where you've created something you really enjoy and it really uses your skill set? To walk away from that's different than to walk away from something that is kind of a drudgery. You can be more selective about the type of work you do and won't do over time as you grow in your reputation, your financial stability. You can say no to difficult clients and travel if you don't want to do that at work, or so there's ways to continue to be a player in the workforce and ease into the other things in life. Maybe you don't want to work as many hours, you want to be available for other grandkids or different things, and that's totally fine. But you don't have to chuck it all to do that. I mean, you can structure it. And this is a lot of what we do with my clients. You can change the structure of how you work to better fit your energy levels and other commitments. I mean, I live a Latino lifestyle. I take a siesta midday and I kind of have a second wind. I really work with my energy levels. Now, if I had a regular job, I couldn't do that. They require you to be there at a certain time. So as a business owner, we have to do it. So we want to factor this in when we're really thinking about, when do I want to leave the workforce? When do I want to leave what I'm doing? Maybe can I change what I'm doing so that I would like it more within still be in the workforce, still be a business owner. If you're fuzzy or you haven't fully processed your retirement exit plan and why, this can affect your morale, motivation, decisions, actions, and attitude about health and quality of life and other things. If you're buying into, I'm at a certain age, I got to think about doing this. Once you've made the decision, okay, I'm just carry me across the finish line, I want to just wake up whenever, and I don't want this pressure. That is going to affect how you're functioning at work. And if you're ready to do that, great. But if you're not ready to do that, you have some ambivalence about that, it's going to negatively affect the kind of decisions you're making. It's gonna be a downer on your motivation. A lot of times, half the battle is having a conscious decision. This is what my plan is. These are the milestones in my winding down over the next 30 years as a 50, 60, 70 year old, 80 into my 80s or whatever. This is what I'm going to do. And you've thought it through, you've made that decision as a business owner, and you can customize your work. That makes a huge difference, because then you can be very focused on the kind of things you're doing, you're not doing, versus when you haven't really thought it through, you're just kind of drudging yourself through things, and you're missing opportunities, and you're not showing up your best self at work for sure. Adopting a belief that once you hit a certain age range, 50s, 60s, 70s, that you have to wind down and exit can create unnecessary pressure to compress the amount of time to achieve your goals and look for immediate wins rather than developing long-term relations and projects. One of the things that impacted me was there was a grandmother who's kind of raised her grandkids, great gal, but she's still working in this late 70s, and partly because they need to. They need the extra income, and it sounded like she hadn't planned on doing that, and so she's kind of piecing together different things. Be honest, if you're not ready to financially retire, it's much better to accept that, and then to look at your work life from that framework than kind of have it sneak up on you, and then you're just kind of scrapping together stuff to make it work. You may have put a lot of time and money into your business and not as much into your investments accounts. So you may be in that situation as a business owner. A lot of business owners do neglect that. So rather than feel anxious and say, well, I've got to get all this together in 5 years, it can actually be more enjoyable if you say, you know what, I didn't put as much emphasis on the investment of my portfolio as I did on my business, but now I have all this ROI, the skills and everything that I can have an ROI. I'm going to be better off working 10 more years than chucking it just because I'm at a certain age. You want to capitalize. A lot of times it's that wisdom and the experience. You earn the 80% of what you do in the last 20%. So if you're exiting, at that time as a business owner, it's something to consider. So just to wrap up, really want you to think about it, think it through. And I look at it this way, if you look at the Catholic Church or God or whatever, so their CEO, let's look at the age of the popes. The average age of the papacy in the early centuries was about 40s and 40 through 60s. Medieval period, 40s through 70s. From modern times until now, the last 200 years, our popes were 60s and 70s, and some ran into the 90s. So if God, in his business on earth, he puts people like that age range leading his business, maybe he's telling us something, that maybe those aren't people to put out to pasture. Maybe they have something to offer. So how you view your retirement, your approach to your work and your personal life absolutely matters. Don't let other people's choices or their opinions influence what you should do. Give yourself the time and space to think through your own philosophy about retirement and how it jives with your Christian belief system. This is what I do. It's never too early to reflect on these things, and this is what I can help you do. This is why I am so passionate about vision. And many of you, if you've listened to my videos, I really encourage you to consider doing a Manifesting Your Vision session. It is a paid service that I offer. To learn how to sign up, you can go to talkwithchristina.com. What I do is I help you really look at what is your holistic vision. If you want to talk about retirement, we can, but I really help you get that roadmap so that all of your actions are in alignment with that. And once you do that, you're so much more effective and you enjoy your life better. So thanks so much for being here. I love doing what I can to educate you and help you have a very rich life and a very prosperous business. Take care.